As a kid, I remember these special Christmas holidays and these special Christmas specials. Maybe for you it was A Christmas Story or the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Maybe it was Rudolph. Maybe it was Frosty. Or maybe it was this one. I could never quite remember the name of it. A Year Without Santa Claus. Where you came in, and I remember as a kid, as a family, watching this show and thinking, oh no, at the beginning, Christmas is going to be canceled this year. Come on, Santa, don't listen to that grumpy old guy. What's going to happen? So I grew up in the Midwest. And in the Midwest, I love skiing. I love December. I love this time of year. But when you grow up in the Midwest, in central Illinois like I did, the closest place to go downhill skiing was Iowa. Iowa, of all places. But I love skiing. So we'd go skiing, and I grew up skiing in the Midwest my whole life, in Indiana, here at Perfect North. Now I ski there with my teenagers once a week, starting the season, over in Sundown, which many people who really skied called it Rundown in Iowa. But I love skiing because the thing about skiing was, you go up the ski lift and you could feel yourself going up the mountain, bump, 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 and I'd get off that ski lift with my skis on, and it'd be like the utter joy of coming down the mountain. Whoo, 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 up, and then you're done because it's the Midwest, and that's how fast it is. And so you get back on the ski lift, and then you get back on. Yes, let's go the other way. Whoosh, whoosh. Okay, it's over. Now, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Somebody told me that when I went out west, I'd be ruined forever towards skiing in the Midwest. So I got my first chance 2 years ago to go out west, and I get on the ski lift. Sure enough. And it goes 3 times as fast. We get to the top. And now I get up and the view is incredible. The Rocky Mountains, the Colorado scenery, it's gorgeous. I come off the ski lift and I'm like going as fast as I can. Utter joy. Never skied in fresh snow, fresh powder. Never even knew what it looked like. I can't even see my skis. They're skiing under the snow. It's magical. It's amazing. I'm going as fast as I can down the slope, turn. Every section I get to, there aren't 2 choices. There's like 5 choices. And I'm skiing for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It's like, whew, wow. I've never had to rest on the way down of a ski slope. And I get back on again. Utter joy coming down that final slope. Wow, this is going to be an incredible day. Now, I wasn't ruined on those places in the Midwest. I still love going skiing every week with my kids. Still love it. Every year. It's been part of our tradition for the last 7 years. But here's what I have discovered. The higher the mountain, the greater the celebration. I still love going skiing in the Midwest. I get a small mountain, I get a small celebration. I go out west and I got a gigantic mountain and a gigantic celebration. And if that Christmas special had started off with, guess what? Santa's going to have Christmas again this year. Yay. That's what we do every time. But the nature of the movie is the mountain we've got to climb is what will we do with depressed Santa Claus? What will we do with discouraged Santa Claus? Oh my goodness, the mountain we have to get over is that Christmas might be canceled this year. And then by the end of the movie, there's an incredible celebration as we figure out how to overcome it. And maybe this Christmas you're facing a mountain. Anything worth doing, anything worth truly celebrating is going to be tough. If you want a great marriage, talk to somebody who's been married 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years. They're not going to romanticize it and say, wow, it's just so easy. They're going to say it's hard work being in a relationship with somebody who thinks so differently. So wrong. Somebody with a different background, somebody with a different idea of what clean is, a different idea of what raising kids are like, a different idea of what it means to save money. When you come back from the store and you say, I saved lots of money. Well, how much did you spend? That's irrelevant. Let me tell you how much I saved, right? The higher the mountain as you grow in your relationship, the tougher it is, but the greater the celebration of all you've been through, and the love deepens because of the mountain and the challenge. You talk to anyone who has great relationships with their kids in their 20s or 30s, they would say, we put in the hard work building a relationship with them since they were young. And it was hard to be interested sometimes in stuff they were interested in. It was time to figure out how to connect with them when they were teenagers. But we put in the hard work, and now we're having a greater celebration. Anything worth doing, worth celebrating, worth having joy over is going to require that kind of work. You watch the Olympics. Maybe it's the Winter Olympics you watched a couple years ago. And you watch at the very end, the guy comes up, he skis up, he does a double flip, helicopter spin around, lands, the judges come up 9.5, 10, and the great celebration that occurs as he went over this incredible mountain. And then he finds out he won the gold. And the camera zooms in and he says, "How do you feel, sir?" And his tears are rolling down his cheeks as he is in such utter joy and celebration. And the camera cuts to his manager who's crying, and his parents who are crying, his brother and sister and friends. There's so much joy because this culmination, this moment represents the sacrifice and the challenge and the difficulty of many, 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 many years or decades preparing for this moment. And you watch the whole thing sitting in your lazy boy and go, "Oh, that's cool." And you wonder why they get so choked up and emotional, because the greater the mountain, the greater the celebration. It's not that you didn't enjoy it, but you didn't climb the same mountain to get there. So I want to talk about a journey that you can go on in any area of your life: health, relationship with kids, family, marriage, and with God. You talk to anyone who has a great relationship with God, they won't say it's easy. Because I had to wrestle with the problem of evil when God let this happen in my life. I had to wrestle with this biblical question because I didn't think the Bible was reliable. I had to really dig into that sometime in my life. As you go through that, you find there's 4 stages to almost every time somebody grows. 4 elevations on that mountain as you go up it. The first one is usually crisis. Then it leads to confusion. What does this mean for our marriage? What does this mean for our family? What does this mean for my faith? What does this mean for my health? What does this mean for my priorities? Then you lead to a crossroads, a moment we have to decide, which way am I going to go? But if you can follow these elevations, you'll get to the top of the mountain. It will lead to a crescendo of greater joy that you can experience. So our first one is a crisis. Again, in the movie, I remember watching as a kid, A Year Without Santa Claus. There's the crisis. Santa Claus is depressed. Santa is sad. What does this mean? And almost every journey I've seen of the folks I've talked to over the years and looked at my own life, every journey toward deeper joy begins with someone having a crisis. Wow. Maybe it's midlife. You begin to say, "Well, is this all there is?" Maybe it's just their higher purpose to life. You begin to wrestle with the Bible or God or Christ, or you wrestle with what's it like to trust God when I've lost someone this season. Maybe it's your first Thanksgiving or Christmas without someone. There's a crisis. And you might be resisting that crisis because your whole life has been about resisting crisis. And God says, "No, I want to use this crisis as the first elevation in a mountain that I want you to climb so that you can have greater joy on the other side." The 3 wise men who find a crisis. They've been traveling, and they come to a question. And usually a crisis begins with a question. And the question they have here is a huge crisis. We may not catch just how much of a crisis it is at first reading, but it is. It says, "Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who was born King of the Jews?'" Now notice the story begins with a question. Hey, where is he who was born King of the Jews? This creates a crisis in Jerusalem, a crisis for the king. We're going to find out that Herod is troubled and all of Jerusalem with him. But it all began with a question of crisis. Where is he who is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and come to worship him. Now, what you need to know about the culture in that time is that the Jewish people hated Herod. They didn't call him Herod the Great. They called him Herod the Wicked. He wasn't born the King of the Jews. He bought his way into it. He was incredibly corrupt. He was a narcissist. He killed off many of his wives in horrific ways. I won't tell you exactly how it happened because it's so disgusting. This guy was a total narcissist, all about himself, and he had bought his way into power. So when the wise people, the wise men show up, and they say, "Where is he who is born King of the Jews?" This is like the thing you don't say at the family gathering. This is the elephant in the room. Because everybody knew Herod was not born King of the Jews. He bought his way into the King of Jews. So they said, "Hey, we've seen a star that God has sent one who is born into the kingdom." And they're talking to the guy who bought his way in when they asked the question, "Is there someone who's been born King of the Jews?" This is the awkward of awkward moments. I had one of those awkward moments. We had a family gathering, playing some games with some friends a couple months ago. And we got a book of questions. We were asking questions, and folks were just sort of answering, "Hey, what was your? If you could go back in time anywhere, where would you go? If you had a time machine, where would you go? What's your favorite thing about your past? What's changed you the most from the past? And so we're laughing together and going around as a family. And we came to my son, he's 15, Javen. And the question was, what do you do now that was impacted by something that happened in the past? And so we're all laughing together and having a good time. He says, well, I think I talk really loud now because my dad used to all the time call me Mr. Mumbler. Awkward. I mean, it was like, and he was sort of laughing, but it was like, ooh, man, I guess I do remember saying that. I didn't realize I said it that many times. I didn't realize that was so hurtful. I began to ask myself a question, this crisis. Man, do I need to get some things right? So I remember after everybody left that night, I pulled him aside. I said, buddy, it sounds like I need to apologize. Man, I did not realize that I'd said that and it was so hurtful. I didn't mean that at the time. And I just had a great chance of apologizing to my son. It was just this awkward moment, but it was a crisis moment for us to reconnect, for me to forgive and say, hey, listen, Dad probably did a whole bunch more things wrong. Let me know whenever you find this stuff out because I want to apologize. I want us to own my own junk. Well, this question is a crisis for Herod. And it's an awkward moment when they ask the guy who bought whether he knows about the guy who was born. And maybe for you, even the whole idea of the Bible, that they've been following a star in the east, you're saying, Chad, this is why I can't believe the Bible and Jesus, that there's a star in the east. This is why the Bible doesn't seem reliable as a historic document. It just seems like a magical fairy tale. Well, how could that star have shown them where they were going? That's the question, maybe. Who is the real Jesus? Who is the real God? Who is the real religion? Well, some people have said that this was a natural event. In fact, that there was a constellation, that maybe God had a natural event cause what they were looking for, and that there was a falling star or a shooting star or a meteorite that was occurring, and it was in the constellation Leo the lion. And that the wise men would have seen the constellation, and there was this falling star right there in the Leo, and Leo, the lion, would represent Judah, and they would have said, oh my goodness, this is a supernatural event in the constellation of Judah. We need to go to Judea, known as being the Lion of Judah, because God's got something happening. So they traveled because of that, and they meet Herod and ask him if he knows anything about it. They search the Bible and find out about Bethlehem. So if you're skeptical about the Bible, just know there's some natural reasons this God might have used to draw them. It's a little less spooky. Other people, the same word for star is the word for angel. And so it may not have been a star, but a little angel. And so the angel could have come in the sky, and they could have actually followed a glowing angel to bring them to this place. And you're saying, oh, geez, you got to be kidding, Chad. You want me to believe the Bible with a glowy angel? Well, think about it this way. Put on your philosophy hat. Almost all philosophers would say that if there's a God, he's all powerful, he's all knowing, and he's all loving. That's sort of what philosophy describes God as. If God is all powerful, and if the book is what it says it is, the Bible claims to be a historic account of God, supernatural God interacting with human beings. And if you read a book, the supposedly historic book about a supernatural God doing stuff, and you didn't find any supernatural events, what would that say? I'd say, wow, you got a lousy God. He didn't even do anything, for crying out loud, right? So actually, if there's supernatural events in the Bible, that actually lends credibility to the story, not less of it. So be careful you don't come to the Bible with what's called an anti-supernatural presupposition. You come to the Bible and say, well, there's anything supernatural in there, well, it can't be true. Actually, it's the opposite. If it's really true, and if it really is about a supernatural being doing stuff, then there should be supernatural events. So God used some either natural event or supernatural event to lead them to this place where they could find the location of the son who was to be born. Now, for me, again, this began with a crisis, and I just see this. Josh McDowell was with us 6-7 months ago. He's sort of a leading scholar on the Bible's reliability. He was once a skeptic, atheist, followed the evidence of a crisis in his faith, and ultimately led him to believe in the God of the Bible. But then he's raising kids. He told us the story at the first service when he was here about 6 months ago about how his kids one day, Sean, came to him when he was a teenager and said, Dad, I don't think I believe the Bible's true. I don't know if I believe Jesus is who he says he is. I mean, this is a guy, this is what he does for a living. He travels around the world and tells people why it's true. And I said, why, does that make you anxious or nervous? He said, no. I turned to my son and said, this is great, son. Great. You got a crisis of faith. This is awesome. Why is this awesome? Because this is your moment to make your faith your own. This is an incredible journey you're about to go on. Because a great journey begins with a crisis. I'm like, wow, I don't usually react that way in my own crisis, although in my family's. But he recognized these elevations. The crisis is the journey to the mountaintop. The second elevation isn't a crisis, but it's confusion. You know, Santa Claus is sick. Santa Claus is gone. Santa Claus ain't going out. So it's confusion. All the elves are like, oh, what does this mean? You're raining on our parade. Does it mean we keep working? What do we do with our inventory? when you have a health crisis, a marriage crisis, or a faith crisis, right after the crisis comes confusion. What does this mean for me? What does this mean for what I have believed? What does this mean for what I do believe? What does this mean for our future together? And the same thing occurs here in the passage. After this question of crisis comes confusion. Here's what it says in the passage. When Herod the king heard this, we'll talk about Herod in just a second, he was troubled. And when Herod's troubled, all of Jerusalem is troubled, because this guy was a power-hungry, financially backed narcissist. You don't make Herod mad or everybody's scared. So the whole city is troubled. When he gathered all the chief priests and scribes together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. So he doesn't know the Bible, even though he's the king of the Jews. He doesn't know his Old Testament. Anybody know where it's supposed to be born? They said, well, yes, in Micah. It's written that in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus is written by the prophet. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah. And here it is. For out of Bethlehem will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Whew. Now this is a big deal. There's a crisis. Because he's the king. Herod's the king. You're telling me there's another king? And this particular king is going to be born out of Bethlehem. Small little town. Insignificant. Weak little place. Smaller than the hometown I grew up in, Groveland. Smaller than Newtown. Little bitty town that God's going to use. And out of it will come one who rules. And in the Bible, many times people are known for ruling not only with power, but with their mind. Solomon had 3,000 proverbs because he ruled with his mind. He ruled by showing people how to live the life according to the Bible. So the ruler could be like a storyteller or a Bible applier. Could be that type of ruler. That God was going to bring out of Bethlehem a one who ruled with their mind, one who was a shepherd to my people Israel, a leader. Immediately would come to mind the shepherd. Oh yeah, the Lord is my shepherd from Psalm 23. Who's the shepherd? God is. God is the shepherd. And God's going to bring out of Bethlehem the shepherd. God himself is going to be born in Bethlehem to lead my people. Well, you can imagine Herod's mad. Herod's confused. The place is confused. What does this mean? Is Herod going to kill people off? What happens? And just to give you an idea how powerful Herod was. Let me show you a picture of what first century Jerusalem looked like. Herod financed the entire building of Jerusalem. Here's what its outline was at the time. The temple in Jerusalem that we see the remnants of today when you go over and see the Wailing Wall, all that was built by Herod just before BC. This guy was richer then than anyone you know today. Richer than Bill Gates today, Herod back then. Richer than Warren Buffett, Herod back then. He was so rich and so powerful, nations, the Roman Empire borrowed money from him, which is why he got his position and power that he has. This is not the guy you want to tick off. This is not the guy you want to be hunting you. He's got means, he's got opportunity, he's got resources, and he's ticked off at you. And this guy is all about his power. About 15 miles from Jerusalem, just outside of Bethlehem, he's built what's now known as the Herodian. You can go visit it today. I got a chance to see it a couple years ago. He built this mountain for himself. This mountain, you see, those are cars. Just to give you how big this mountain is. Those are cars by a white building at the bottom of the hill. He had this mountain built bucket by bucket by bucket. Up, 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 because he wanted to look down on Jerusalem. So 15 kilometers away, he builds his own mountain, builds a palace on top of it. And from Jerusalem in the top right, you can see his palace, his mountain from Jerusalem. And this guy who built a mountain to himself, just nearby, is someone who's born in a manger. And now the crisis of confusion comes for all of us. What's life really about? Is it about building mountains to ourselves or being willing to be born in a manger to serve others? There's two different ways of life, two different philosophies, two different ethics that are in power here. Who will ultimately win, the manger or the mountain? One of them, Jesus, is a descendant of Jacob. Herod is a descendant of Esau. This lifelong Bible challenge between Jacob and Esau is at battle right here in Bethlehem. And for you, there's going to come a crisis moment where you've got questions that lead to crisis, and then you have confusion. What does this mean for me? What am I going to do about this? What does this mean for my life? Am I going to live my life to exalt myself and get more and more and more from me? Or am I going to come and be willing to serve others and be humble and teachable? And is that the way that you succeed in life? That's the question we got to ask. There's a moment in the movie where Snow Miser shows up. You see, Santa Claus, in order to sort of save the day for Santa Claus, they got to get people to have more Christmas cheer. So they come to this small town of this mayor and they say, "Mayor, would you be willing to help us get more Christmas cheer so Santa will know that everybody cares about us?" He says, "Well, not unless you make it snow here in the southern town." So, "Well, we can't make it snow. We got to go talk to the Snow Miser and the Heat Miser." And this crisis moment leads to confusion, which leads to a crossroads. What are we going to do? In case you don't remember the song, I want to let you listen to the song of this moment where they come to a crossroads. How are we going to deal with this issue of moving things forward? Let's watch. So Mrs. Claus has to go over their head and go to Mother Nature to get things done. If you remember those songs, in one sense, think about the Heat Miser and the Snow Miser. It's like these two different systems are at play here. Herod's system and Jesus' system. And there's no real compromise between the two. Is your life about giving credit to yourself, or is it about living to give credit to something else? These are in conflict. And so this crisis leads to confusion, and that leads to a crossroads. How will you interact when you come face to face with these two value systems? How you come face to face in your marriage when it comes to time when you're going to either put other people first or yourself first. When you come face to face, the idea is your money about building a bigger palace for yourself or by blessing other people. You see, the next elevation on the mountain is always a crossroads. We see that here in the passage. Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go, search carefully for the young child. When you found him, bring back word to me that I may come and worship him also." So if you come across a higher meaning, a higher purpose, a greater source of power, a better leader than you, are you threatened? Are you fearful? Are you angry? Are you insecure? Remember, these wise men are foreign dignitaries. They are people of power as well. They could be equally as insecure, equally as fearful. Yet they both have to come to a crossroads. Is surrendering myself to a higher power going to lead me to joy or lead me to fear? See, the crossroads is for the foreign dignitaries who are the wise men. They say, we want to know if this is God's king, whatever that means. We're going to trust that God knows best. We want that in our life. So we come to a crossroads and say, we found a new king, we're going to seek. Herod finds out about a new king and he wants to destroy. And when you come across these two value systems, the mountain and the manger, you're going to have a moment in your life. You have to come to a crossroads. Am I going to seek God in the midst of this, or am I going to abandon him and try and destroy him? You come to a place you say, boy, I thought I could trust God, but now he allowed this to happen in my life. And I didn't think a good God would ever let this happen in my life. You're at a crossroads. And at that crossroads, you're either going to seek or you're going to destroy. You're going to crumble and say, I guess I've just been naive for too long. And some of you are like that. You've been at a moment where 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, something happened, and that was the moment that you came to a crossroads and said, I'm done with God. I don't care what his reason is. I don't want to have anything to do with a God who would let this happen in my life. And I want to encourage you. I know it's a tough mountain. I know it's a high climb. Pull out your pickaxe. Pull out your climbing gear. And instead of sliding back down the mountain and giving up, I want you to begin to keep the climb up and say, I want to keep seeking. I don't understand it yet. I'm wrestling with God. I'm wrestling with his purpose. I'm wrestling with my purpose. But I'm going to keep seeking because I want the joy at the top. I want to get to the crescendo. And even though I wish it was a smaller mountain, I wish it was somebody else's mountain for that. I wish I could outsource this mountain. I want to keep climbing it because the higher the mountain, the higher the celebration. And though it looks like Herod is, oh wow, I can't wait to seek this God that you have. I can't wait for that. We're going to find out he's going to try and kill off everybody in Bethlehem from 2 years and younger because he doesn't want them to have that. I remember I had a defining moment in my life where I had to choose between the manger and the mountain. My last church, the senior pastor and I just didn't seem to agree on some things. And I was trying to be a person under submission, but I wanted to take control. And so I had this constant, almost daily battle between submission and control. Between being humble and trying to listen to his way of doing things and me telling him you're a moron. Every day was a crossroads. And part of it, looking back on it, was me being 30 and young and thinking I knew everything and I didn't. But every day I had a decision, a crossroads. Am I going to choose the mountain, it's all about me, or am I going to choose the manger and to serve others? I remember it came to a moment, I'd been accused of things that weren't true at all. I'd been accused of building a church within a church and trying to divide the church, and all kinds of hurtful things were being said about me, and I was very angry about it. I was very hurt about it. I was very fearful about it. very mad about it. We finished the conversation one day. We had an intermediate mediator come between us to help us come up with a plan so we could work together. At the end of the meeting, we both decided the best thing was for me to transition churches. And we said we'd make it a nice, healthy transition over a 3-month period of time where I'd have time to look for a job because it takes about 2 years to find a senior pastor in most church searches. And we agreed to that. At the end of the meeting, he called me up the next day and said, hey, I talked to the elders and instead we're going to give you 30 days. 30 days? You can't find a job. Oh, my goodness. Now I'm even more angry and mad. But I had a crossroads. Am I going to submit to this unreasonable request and trust God, or am I going to just blaze the earth? Because I could easily have divided the church multiple ways. I could easily have gotten people on my side and caused a big division. A lot of the reason most of us gave up on church is because you just saw church people be so petty and so angry and so normal, right? And you were hoping that faith in God would show something different. And I remember sitting in my room and just saying, God, I want to live a different kind of life. I mean, ironically, I could now do the things I'm being accused of. So much so that Great Temptation gave him, one of our largest donors in the church, was given like 50% of the overall budget for the church. It was a large church, so a huge donor, approached me personally and said, Chad, I believe in what you're doing. I think you're being treated poorly. I will personally finance renting a new building, and we'll start church next week. And because I was a creative arts director, the whole creative team was with me. The band, the lighting, the music. I had the whole creative team. So in one sense, I had 30-day notice and no job, and I had 2 houses because I had a rental home I was using for my kids' college at the time. 2 homes in a market that wasn't selling with no job in 30 days. Or I had job next week with money, with resources, and a chance to turn to the person who had accused me of things and saying, watch how I can do it. I was at a crossroads. And boy, there's a lot of prayer. There's a lot of gritting of teeth. A lot of conversation with my wife. And we came to the conclusion that churches don't divide in any kind of healthy way unless the mother church blesses the church plant. So I called up my friend. I said, listen, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't take you up on your offer because it's going to hurt what God's doing here. And I kept my mouth shut. And it was during those 30 days that I found out about a little church meeting over at Cincinnati Country Day School called Horizon. My wife went up here on a spring break trip. She said, Chad, this is just like what we did in Atlanta. And within 60 days, I was hired here at Horizon to be the creative arts director and the teaching pastor. And I'm convinced that God's work in the last 12 years at our church is because of that crossroads where I had a chance to exalt myself, to demand my own way, to stick it in the eye of a guy who I thought was doing bad by me. As hard as it was, I chose humility and I chose dependence on God. And that crossroads led to a place of incredible celebration. The last 12 years of being here at Horizon, the joy I've had of seeing what God has done, God is doing. And I'm telling you, as exciting as it would have been just to make a nice transition 3 months and come here and see what God did, the joy I have is so much more because I see how God was trustworthy in the mountains, trustworthy in those dark, difficult, jagged places up the mountain. And again, back to our movie. If the movie, A Year Without Santa Claus, was just, hey, Santa Claus is here and it's another Christmas, there wouldn't be this celebration. There wouldn't have been the crescendo, right? It would just be it's another one. It's because of the crisis. It's because of the confusion. It's because of what are we going to do? Is heat miser going to get away with it? Is the snow miser going to do it? Will Mother Nature get in? Is this all going to work out? It's all of that mountain that leads you at the end to go, it worked. The celebration that we're having Christmas and we almost lost it. And the crescendo for the wise men is this. It says in the passage, it leads to a crescendo because after this long journey and this long journey they've been on, next slide, we're going to look at the next slide. They come to the place where they see this child. And behold, the star they had seen in the east was before them. Again, probably an angel brought them right to Bethlehem. A star, a glowing angel. Till it came and stood over where the young child was. And then they saw the star and they saw the child. They rejoiced with what kind of joy? Exceedingly great joy. Not just joy. Not just great joy, exceedingly great joy because they've been on a long journey. Exceedingly great joy because they came face to face with Herod. Exceedingly great joy because God was leading them and God was directing them. And the thing they thought they were trusting in God proved to be true. Exceedingly great joy. I want to invite the band to come up. And I want you to see that scene at the end of this movie. The exceedingly great joy scene where you get to just see the change in the kids' lives, the change in Santa Claus' life, the change in the mayor's heart as he sees what has happened on this crescendo, this mountain. And I want you to think about wherever you are in your journey. You might be at the crisis moment. Maybe you're in the confusion. You don't know what to do. Maybe you're at that crossroads. You're trying to decide which way to go. I want to tell you it's worth it. It's worth it to take the path less traveled. Because there is a crescendo of joy coming. A type of giving and a type of living that the wise men found that few find. The joy of celebration. Let's watch. Maybe you want that. Maybe you want that joy of Christmas. You want to get back to the heart of it. And you're saying, boy, Chad, I want the crescendo. I just don't want the crisis or the confusion. Right? That's all of us are like that. But God says, no, I want the crescendo for you, but you can't miss the other stages. I mean, how could the thing that is the biggest mountain in your life, the biggest challenge in your life, the biggest difficulty in your life, how could that actually be a source of joy? Well, you remind yourself that the higher the mountain, the greater the celebration. I was watching a guy named Nick, who has no arms and no legs, speak this week. He was born without arms and legs. Nobody knows why. He goes around the country now and he talks about his faith in Christ and how when he was bullied, when he was made fun of, when he was thought his life had no meaning or purpose, it was his belief in Jesus Christ who began to teach him he was loved how he is. And more than that, that his liability, not having arms and legs, could be a source of incredible joy and inspiration. Now he travels the world to talk about the purpose he's found because of Christ. If you told him there's nothing you can do, he'd say, well, the mountain's been tough, but I've learned how to surf with no arms and legs. I can swim with no arms and legs. He told a story about driving in his car, and he was in the passenger seat, and a woman pulled up next to him. And from the car door, he looks normal from here up. So he decided to sort of play a joke on her. So he took his seatbelt off. He's got this little sort of foot thing that he can use to maneuver a little bit. He took his seatbelt off, and while he's looking at her, she looked at him. And he turned completely in a circle. And just the joy he's finding in bringing happiness to other people, forgiveness he's found from Christ, the leadership and purpose in his life. And here's the guy who would say, having no arms and no legs, I would have said was my mountain. But here's what I found. It was the greatest source of joy God's used in my life. That's what I encourage you today. Whatever you're at, they say, God, I've been asking you to take away this crisis. But instead, God, I want you to take this falling star and turn it into a rising star. Take my star of crisis, and I'm asking you would use that very thing to become the star of joy. And that's not easy to do, because maybe we're just like, get out of the crisis. God, I want to use the crisis. And our takeaway today is just say, God, I'm following the star like the wise men did. I'm following that star. And I want to ask that you use this circumstance, this mountain, this difficulty in my life. Use this falling star. Use this star of crisis to be my rising star, the star of joy. You know, the last 5 years I've shared lots of stories about my wife and I going through a variety of difficulties with having a special needs son, and my wife hitting 40 and going through depression, which then led to me to be going through depression. I was trying to figure out how to lean on each other in the midst of it. And if I was to prescribe it, I would have said, hey, please, no depression. I don't want that mountain. But we've climbed that mountain together the last 5 years. And I'm telling you, the depth of our commitment to God, the depth of our commitment to each other, the way that we've loved each other in the midst of the most difficult of circumstances, I still wouldn't wish it. But I can tell you this, I never would have gotten out of it. The intimacy, the dependence, the joy, had I not gone through it. I'm in a place now, and Beth and I had a conversation a few weeks ago where we just said, hey, let's have a sort of final sort of forgiving of one another for anything we did to bruise each other, and let's just set that behind us and say, here's where we are now. And it was just such a sweet time of trusting God and seeing where God had brought us through. So if you'd like to stand with me, we're going to sing a couple carols together as we conclude. And the carols are about the wise men. And let's sing what it is to be those three wise men who followed a star into crisis. Let's sing together.